Hi, I'm Eloy Ortiz Oakley, and welcome back to The Rant, the podcast where we pull back the curtain and break down the people, the policies, and the politics of our higher education system. In this episode, I'm looking back at my experiences at ASU GSV, a conference held in San Diego recently. In the following episodes, I will be talking with some interesting innovators in post-secondary education who are working to bring quality learning to more people of diverse backgrounds. Today, I'm talking with Pierre Dubuc, CEO and co-founder of OpenClassrooms, an online education platform focused on apprenticeships. Before I welcome Pierre, I need to say that I am currently an advisor at OpenClassrooms, but Pierre is not paying me to say anything that I'm about to say. So now that that's out of the way, Pierre, welcome to The Rant.
Thank you, Eloy.
Well, it's great to have you. It's good to see you at ASU GSV. So, Pierre, for folks who have not met you or have not heard about what you're doing in the U.S., you're French, from France. You got your start there. Tell our listeners about your background, your education, your professional journey, and what led you to launch an education startup company in France and then bring it here to the U.S.
Yeah, good question. So I started OpenClassrooms a while ago now. I'm 34 right now. I'm currently based in New York. But I started this business in France with my friend and co-founder Mathieu in the south of France when we were actually teenagers. Wow. At the age of 11 and 13, we started creating online courses.
Did you say 11 and 13?
11, indeed. Yes. Middle school. And Mathieu back then started writing, creating courses he wish he had found back then. That was in 1999, so more than 20 years ago. And he created a first course on web development to teach folks HTML, wow, creating pretty simple websites. But back then in 1999, there were not, all of the courses you can find online in YouTube or anything like that. So
that's all right, because when I was 11, there was no internet. So it's come a long way.
That is true. But yeah, it was the beginning, right? So he created one of the very first courses to learn coding in French. And I started joining that adventure, this journey. I created the website itself. So it was creating content, I was creating the website, and we created together this learning community for free as a pure hobby. It was not a business at all. Obviously, we're very young and we had no idea what a business actually meant. But we started sharing that for free, really the courses which we had at school, basically. And years after years, it became actually the reference platform to learn coding in French-speaking countries. So after 5-10 years doing that as a pure hobby, we did that in middle school, in high school, in college. You would say a not-for-profit organization, or it was not even an organization. It was just us spending our free time on that. But we figured when we were in college, so we study engineering, communications, and so master's degree. I noticed that actually some of my colleagues, peer students, were actually using my own website instead of going to lectures, because they thought it was more informative, it was more accessible and so on, just better. And at the end of our studies, we decided basically to make it our full-time job and created OpenClassrooms. So that was 10 years ago. In 2013, we created OpenClassrooms as a public benefit corporation, a mission-driven company. And the mission of OpenClassrooms is to make education accessible, and especially education leading to jobs. So it's really at the crossroad of higher education, vocational training, apprenticeship, workforce development. The outcome for us in terms of the social impact we're having is the number of students we place in the workforce. That could be for first job, that could be for promotion, salary increase, switching careers, and so on and so forth. And then back then, we quickly became actually a state-endorsed college with degree awarding powers. And that was very, very new. We were the very first ones in France to provide online degrees. And we got degree accreditation, and we started offering associate, bachelor's, master's degrees leading to new jobs in tech and IT, such as, coding and data and AI and cybersecurity and so on. And then, got started like
Wow.
this.
So when you were growing up in France and creating these online courses in high school and beyond, were you motivated by any other companies that were doing something similar? On the mid 2000s, we had Udacity popping up, we had edX, Coursera starting to get moving in the MOOC space. Were you paying attention to those companies, or were you just doing your own thing and growing it on your own?
I think we were doing our own thing until very late. And then when that MOOC wave really started and we saw, Coursera, Udacity, edX, and so on popping up, we're like, interesting, like online courses for free with massive numbers of users. Like that sounds familiar to us. And we thought actually, until then, we thought we were really doing something fairly like unique. In a good and in a bad way. When you're the only one offering a service, maybe that you're very unique and super innovative, or maybe there's no market. You're on your own, right? It definitely felt like, oh, we're actually exactly on that vertical, if you will, and it is starting. So exactly at this time, we decided, okay, let's do it. Let's do it full time. Let's raise some funds. Let's go big, make it our full-time job, and pivot towards this edtech vertical that was really starting back then. So we didn't really have like the benefit of having like big brands behind us, like, Ivy League universities or anything like that. But we thought, yeah, let's try it out. We're already like fairly legitimate, I would say, in Europe. Let's try it out. So we started at this time raising funds and like building OpenClassrooms as you know it today.
Wow, that's a great story. So I know, as I've spoken to founders over the years, they're very sensitive and particular about the name that they gave their startup. What is it about the name OpenClassrooms that led you to use that as the name of your new company?
There is a good story behind it, because the name of the website we started back in 1999 was not OpenClassrooms. It was in French Site du Zéro, which means like the website for newbies, basically, like where you learn from scratch, from zero. And at this time, so it was obviously in French. And when we decided to move into like the MOOC space and degrees and becoming a college and so on, at this very time, we wanted to become more global, but also we were perceived as a community to learn IT and tech. So some of our community thought that we were an education platform, and some others thought we were an IT platform, interestingly. And both were true in a way. So we wanted to make clear that our intent was education. IT is a content, and maybe we would get into other fields of study in the future. Our true mission was around education. So we wanted to be global and clearly on education. We had also this mindset of open source. We publish everything under the same license as Wikipedia, Creative Commons. So it's very open. So open something in education, and then we came up with this name, OpenClassrooms.
Well, I think it's stuck. Let's talk about OpenClassrooms. How do you see your company changing the way learners and employers think about things like apprenticeships? Because I know your model, some of your success has been focused on this notion of creating pathways to jobs. So you mentioned IT, which are perfect for the apprenticeship model. So how do you see what you're doing changing the way that learners and employers think about apprenticeships?
So I'd say back to the mission of OpenClassrooms, making education accessible. For us, in a way, it means several things. It means accessible anywhere, anytime, all ages, in a very flexible way in terms of your schedule, accessible to individuals with disabilities, obviously financially accessible. So it should be cheap or free or funded. You shouldn't be in debt to get access to quality education. But education should also be a way to access really impactful socioeconomic mobilities. So get a job, get a salary increase, switch careers, create your own venture. So how do you find a way to do all of that at the same time? It's not easy. On the market, there is also a huge talent gap, skills gaps. Employers have many needs. They don't fulfill them in a really efficient way. So we wanted to find a way to provide quality education at scale in an accessible way, leading to good careers. So I would say at some point we started getting into the apprenticeship space, which is a walk and study program eventually. So it's really at the crossroad of, college, education, higher education, learning, training, and walking, because you're effectively already walking. You have a work contract, you're employed by an employer, you're on the job with us, for example, like 4 days a week, on the job training, 1 day a week, you're going to be trained by us, by OpenClassrooms, with a mentor. So it's a learn and earn model in which you're being paid while you get a training. So it's really wonderful because not only you don't have to pay for any tuition fees, never, you're not in debt, and you get paid. So you have wages, for us on tech jobs, it would be typically about $25 an hour, getting, increased over time as you gain more skills. And after, 6, 12 months, you could get to $40, $50 an hour, which is pretty decent wage when you're still learning in a college degree program. So our intent for us was to say, hey, the ideal world would be that you're employed from day one. Your training costs are covered by the employer. You learn on the job and it's recognized academically. So you get college credits. And at the end, you could have actually a college degree this way. So it's what we would call degree apprenticeship. So in a way, you would have access to college education for free, being paid while you do so.
That sounds like a great deal. Now that you've been operating in the US for some time, you're living in New York now, you're becoming quite the American. What do you see as the main difference in the way that people think about apprenticeships and this job training and education aspect of what you do? What's different in France versus what you have found here in the US?
I think there are many similarities actually, and obviously differences, but the similarities we've seen in Europe a few years ago are the same. And that means, for example, there is confusion between apprenticeship and internship or co-ops. And it's not very clear what apprenticeship means to employers, to families, to students. It's still bubbling up, I would say. It still requires some level of explaining what apprenticeship means. So that's one. Behind apprenticeship, there is a preconception that apprenticeship is only for lower levels of qualification, trade jobs, blue-collar jobs. So apprenticeship kind of makes sense if I want to become a plumber or a truck driver or a carpenter, but I want to have a college degree, I want to be an engineer, I want to be this and that. So apprenticeship is really not for me. And we had the same conception, I would say, in Europe, because apprenticeship, the way apprenticeship was initially created centuries ago, it came from trade jobs. So it makes sense that the perception is around the trade jobs and blue-collar jobs. That changed over time. And I think we've seen more and more apprenticeship programs on higher levels of qualifications and white-collar jobs or new-collar jobs. And then the blend between apprenticeship and college degree programs. So in a way, for example, in France, and that came fairly recently through public policy changes in 2018, then the COVID wave also really helped accelerate the access to apprenticeship. The government also put down some stimulus package to incentivize employers to hire apprentices. And in a nutshell, in about 5 years, we went from 400,000 apprentices in the country to nearly 1 million. So more than doubling in 5 years the number of apprentices. in comparison, in the States right now, we have less than half that number of apprentices, but the country is five times bigger. So per capita is about 10 times more. It's as if there were 5 million apprentices in the States right now. And we have only a tenth of that. So huge increase. You have now about 20 to 25% of an age group that is in apprenticeship at a given time in France.
Right.
Huge. So it's becoming really mainstream. And what became mainstream in the perception is that you can access the best education, the best colleges through apprenticeship. So you can graduate from, let's say, Harvard or MIT through apprenticeship. So that completely changed the perception both by employers and also by families and parents, right? Because if you can get an Ivy League degree through apprenticeship, then apprenticeship is pretty good, and it's debt-free and you get paid and so on and so forth. So they really moved the needle, and we're starting seeing that journey in the States, but we still probably have a few years ahead of us to make that change completely.
Well, you're young, so you have plenty of time.
Exactly, and energy.
Now that you've been operating in the U.S. for some time, what kind of partners do you have here in the U.S.? What are your typical partners?
So first of all, in the States, we focus on registration with the U.S. Department of Labor to have our apprenticeship program be recognized. So we call that registered. So it leads to a US DOL certificate of completion for apprentices. Employers have also access to first a seal of approval in some way, but also funding. So we got registered in several states, and then obviously apprenticeship is really driven by employer demand. So you need to start from the employer side. So we started working with companies like Merck or Nestle on their business needs in terms of talent, skills, and jobs. They struggle to hire on certain jobs like data, for example, and they have businesses in that field, in that skill set, but also a challenge in terms of diversity and creating more diverse talent pipelines. So we bring them, in a way, a solution to solve those business challenges and the skills gap they face, and at the same time, this diversity gap they also face. So we started working with employers, and then down the road, obviously, we started operating apprenticeship programs, so finding apprentices, training them on the job, fulfilling business needs, and so on. And then more recently, we started also collaborating with universities, colleges, and community colleges to help them provide pathways, career pathways to their graduates, and operate more and more apprenticeship programs, pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs locally in their local community, leveraging their alumni and graduates to, again, fulfill local employers' needs. So it's been more recent. We started also working with universities around credit transfer agreements. For example, UMass would grant, credits to our students and graduates or apprentices. So really trying to build partnerships with the ecosystem around higher education and workforce development. So that means employers, universities, colleges, community colleges, workforce development boards as well, states themselves. So it's a complex model because you need to work with many different entities.
Do you find the regulatory environment better or worse here in the US versus in the EU?
I would say there's a lot of area of improvement.
Well, it's nice to see that you have a political bone in you. So that was a good political question.
Exactly.
Answer to the question.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I mean, you know that better than anybody, and clearly on the higher education, there are many challenges when it comes to higher education in the States: student debt, student outcomes, job placement rates, the cost of education. All of those challenges absolutely need to be addressed. We're seeing a decline in student enrollments in higher education for just a few years, and that decline will continue to probably accelerate because nobody can afford college education anymore versus the ROI and the upside on your career. So huge challenge there, and I think a part of that lies in public
Right.
policy, clearly in accreditation, Title IV, and all of that. On apprenticeship, I'd say the apprenticeship market is still fairly skewed towards
That's
trade
right.
jobs, blue-collar workers. It's not growing quickly, even though there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of like conversations and public debates around apprenticeship, but the number of apprentices in the country is not growing. It's kind of flat-ish. It might grow, and many institutions such as OpenClassrooms are trying to push on that agenda. Some governors also are pushing really hard on that, like in California, but we're not
Right.
there yet. The level of regulation and the public policy is still fairly complicated. It's still fairly scattered and heterogeneous in the country, meaning now apprenticeship providers are very local and usually not-for-profit organizations. Right. So in a way, it's not very scalable. So you need to bring apprenticeship providers into what we call intermediaries. So really making matches between employers and apprentices. You need to bring scalable models, and you need a business model to do that. So some sort of funding that could come from employers, privately funded, that could come from states or workforce development boards in a way, or mix up all of the above. But it needs to be scalable. And everywhere in Europe where we've seen a really fast growth in the number of apprentices, like in France or the UK as well, in Germany and Switzerland, we've seen a change in public policy with a scalable business model. Whenever we'll start seeing that in the States, I do think we will start seeing a huge growth in the number of apprentices. That might happen in the next few years right now in California, where they started to introduce a more scalable business model for apprenticeship. So very curious to see how that's going to unfold.
Well, I think the key here is the employers. And if they're driving this change, if they're driving the demand for apprenticeships, I think you'll start to see public policy change. I know that's been happening here in California. The conversations around apprenticeships have picked up significantly in the last 5 years. And post-COVID, I think that the kinds of areas of employment that are in great demand, whether that's healthcare, farm tech, IT, teaching, they're all very well aligned with the apprenticeship model. So I'm hopeful that this picks up the pace here in the next few years. Let me ask you a couple last questions before we close. So as a founder operating here in the U.S. now, the economic environment has been relatively tough. How have you been navigating this difficult economic environment, especially with the backdrop of the near collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, the shutdown of several regional banks? It seems like every week we hear more news about the challenges in the banking industry. Is that constraining you, or do you feel confident that you're going to be able to continue to access the capital you need to grow?
Those are very good questions. And I think also, generally speaking, the edtech industry has been hit pretty badly in the past 12 months. And still, we're seeing last week, Chegg announced that ChatGPT is starting to have a negative impact on their business. Their share dropped by 50%. And there are other players like Pearson, also took a hit. So the edtech environment also, it's tough, and valuations went down. The tech industry also obviously took a hit, like you explained. So it is a rough time, generally speaking, in the industry. It was also kind of crazy good in 2020 and 2021, probably too good. And there is obviously kind of a swing back that we're experiencing right now. I see it obviously as an opportunity because we've seen also many more competitors, many more players. That's going to clean up the market, quite frankly. So if you can navigate through that, it's likely that, after bear market, we'll see a more bull market. I don't know when, but it will eventually arrive. And if you're still there with good foundations, it's likely others will not, and you will be able to harvest new opportunities. So now, how can we navigate that concretely, I think it's challenging because our model is really skewed towards employers, B2B clients, and as you said, B2B clients right now also, more cautious. Some of them in tech industry are laying off. At the very least, they're being really more cautious about recruitment. So obviously, apprenticeship in a way is recruitment. So the number of recruitments is definitely decreasing. So we try to be agile and adapt our model when there is less recruitment. It's likely that you still need new skills to adapt to new challenges that your industry is facing. So that means you're going to probably invest more in finding those skills internally. So meaning upskilling and reskilling existing employees. So we're seeing that move in the past year from what I would call external apprenticeship, meaning building a new talent pipeline to hire new talent, towards more like internal apprenticeship, meaning learning a new job on the job and providing that to existing employees. For us, we have a product in both segments, but it's obviously a change in the way you sell and who you sell to. I think also large organizations have been hit, but SMBs are still like very dynamic actually. So convincing SMBs to hire apprentices is definitely on the top of our agenda. It's not easy, but I think if we can start seeing SMBs, smaller businesses hire more and more apprentices, like it is the case again in Germany, Switzerland, UK, France, and Europe, that will scale the number of apprentices in the country. So we're definitely pushing that.
Well, you've survived since age 11, so I think you'll be just fine. You'll be just fine. Well, let me ask you one final question. Pierre, you were recently at ASU GSV. That's where we bumped into each other. I know you've been attending the last few years. Did you enjoy this year's ASU GSV, and what did you get out of the experience?
I enjoyed it. I was very disappointed. It was raining and cold this year. What is going on there in San Diego, raining in April? But yeah, I obviously enjoyed it. It's always a great experience. You see everybody in the industry pretty much in 3 days. Lots of conversations around AI, ChatGPT. I mean, it was on everybody's panel and top of mind pretty much anywhere. I saw also a lot of organizations kind of plateauing and kind of refocusing energies, resources, and trying to reassess, okay, what is it that we need to do? So many organizations, actually in the past few years, were very bullish. I think that really changed, like we talked about earlier. So I didn't see a lot of massive progress actually between this year and last year's edition. Most organizations were almost around the same stage, which is quite interesting. But I've seen also, reading between the lines, also many organizations really struggling just to get funding and navigating through those tough times. So it's going to be interesting to see in a year time who will survive that tougher environment, which type of decisions did they take, good and bad, and learn from those mistakes and moves they made.
Well, Pierre, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join us here on The Rant. Really love what you're doing, love your story. So really wish you the best of luck, and thank you for being here on The Rant.
Thank you, Eloy.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining me on The Rant. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the like button and leave me your comments. To hear more episodes, subscribe to this YouTube channel or find us on your favorite podcast platform. Take care, everybody, and we'll be back with you soon.